Good afternoon. My name is Mark Butler. I'm the Global Partner Manager for HP with Zebra Technologies. I'm here with James Alberghine. He is the North American Technical Lead on the Global Partners team. We are actually here at the HP Customer Welcome Center where they bring customers to do briefings. We actually have a Zebra pod set up behind us, and this is here full time for the HP folk to bring customers in and do demonstrations and have meetings. James, why don't you tell us what we have behind us here?
Sure, kind of a plethora of different products from our portfolio that really kind of represent a number of different use cases, but in this case we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare. Starting off from your left, your left-hand side is the ZD510HC, which is a wristband printer, and we have a little bit of a demonstration and an application right here we're going to talk about in a second. We also have a ZD500R, which is an RFID encoding variant of the printer as well that will also print out wristbands. But it can also do labels and other media as well. Then off to our right-hand side, we have our TC52 Healthcare, RFD8500, which we're going to talk a little bit about further use cases with RFID, as well as some scanning. ZQ520, EC30, which you probably might not know yet, but that's a little kind of enterprise companion device, as well as a DS9908R, which is an RFID-enabled scanner as well.
Barcode scanner, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you want to start? So if I'm a patient coming into the hospital?
Sure.
Where you want to start?
Yeah, let's start right there. So talking from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, our ZD510HC, which is a healthcare variant, so you'll notice by the white kind of plastics here, is a cartridge-based printer that allows you to be able to print out wristbands. So in this case, you can be able to see this wristband that it actually printed out. It'll have a barcode, a QR code. It could have a number of different pieces of information custom printed onto this wristband, and then it would wrap right around the patient's wrist and then stick right on, and then you'd be able to track them throughout the hospital utilizing that wristband. And there's a secondary variant. With this variant, with the ZD500R, it's essentially the same exact premise. It's still a direct thermal printer that you're going to be printing out onto a wristband, but the difference is that it has an RFID chip that you encode onto it. So there's actually a serial, it's like a serialization of a patient. So you mark, as you're wandering around the hospital or anywhere, it doesn't really matter if you have an RFID chip on you and I have the correct infrastructure to support that, I could be able to track you. So
as I go through certain choke points.
Exactly, yeah. So one of the big use cases that we started to realize or started to get as feedback is that in emergency rooms they're losing patients. So during check-in, whether it be a self-service kiosk or through registration, if you immediately issue them a wristband with an RFID chipping encased inside of it, you'd be able to track them through that process as well, and that way you don't lose any patients.
Okay, never again lose a patient.
Never again lose a patient. From admissions to discharge, it's very important to keep track of all of your patients. So actually kind of moving forward from there, so there's kind of a little bit of a segue from that initial RFID encoding and printing all the way through to our devices. So you'll notice like our TC52 Healthcare, this is actually healthcare grade plastics that can be wiped down and disinfected utilizing healthcare grade wipes. And there's a number of different applications you can do with this. A lot of people are utilizing it for Workforce Connect, which is a device-to-device communication system, which we'll talk about a little bit about it in a second. But in this case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to validate or find out where a specific patient is. So I can actually be able to see that RFID label, wrist label that Mark has right there. Let's say if I'm trying to find Mark, I can be able to start the process, and you can hear as it's starting to beep. It doesn't hear any you don't hear any RFID. And then all of a sudden I'm able to get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and I can validate that is actually Mark, although he's covering the RFID with his with his fingers. So
that's much
better.
Big difference. Big difference. Yeah, I was covering.
So that's actually a good call out, because RFID is an interesting technology where if you do run into issues, actually these are supposed to be applied in a way that it actually tabs off to the side.
Which I did not do.
Which you didn't do. So this would actually go around your wrist, and then this would be a little bit of a flapper right here, so that way it doesn't get impacted by the skin or the actual human that it's interacting with. But what's interesting about it is as I get closer, It's like a Geiger counter.
I
It's
was
going
gonna
to
say, that's
identify.
the Geiger counter. People will remember that name, Geiger counter.
Yeah, and you can be able to do inventory with this. So we'll talk a little bit about specimen labels in a little bit. Blood bags, pretty much anything that is RFID enabled into it, you can be able to do that between these two devices. And the cool thing about the RFD8500 is that it can connect to any device via Bluetooth, whether it be Android, whether it be a computer, Windows-based. It's completely device agnostic, so it can connect to whatever to be able to send over that information.
If you just out for the sake of mentioning it, if you are using even some third-party products, but especially Zebra products, there are mounts where you can actually connect this and it becomes physically attached.
Yeah, as you can see, I mean, I was like a little bit fumbling around with it, you know, but it's a pretty ergonomic device, really lightweight. You can also put it as a wrist, or like a kind of a wrist strap to be able to carry it around. But again, it's really made for that kind of mobile use case to be able to identify. And you can even turn off the sound, and it can actually be able to. You'll notice that little green LED, so that way you won't impact the patient if they're sleeping.
In the patient's room, right?
Exactly. Yeah. What you're trying to do is minimize their impact based on what you're trying to do within that environment.
And raise their satisfaction scores of the hospital, sure.
Yeah, so a little bit to the right of that, we actually have our enterprise companion device, and the reason why we wanted to kind of bring this in is that a lot of the use cases that you're going to start to see with these type of devices is that these are being issued to every employee, whether it's a janitorial worker to multiple different verticals. It could be manufacturing, where they're interacting with robots and they have minimal use cases, all the way through to healthcare with maybe not nurses. They might get a little bit higher grade device, a little bit bigger screen.
The transport,
yep. That type of stuff. So what you're able to do is you can be able to, let's say if I give Mark that one, okay, and I'm able to come over here and I have my push-to-talk express. Now I can be able to communicate with Mark right off the bat. So if I was to use that dedicated push-to-talk button that's actually on the left side of my device, I'm going to be able to hear that little, and you can hear me through the device. And then if Mark was going through and talking,
and I'm going to reply back.
Oh.
Yep, I think I let go of the key, but okay.
So essentially you have the ability to talk back and forth between devices. There is a step up from this within Workforce Connect where you can do PBX and SIP integration as well. So that way you can get phone calls directly to those devices too. But it's kind of cool the way that you can be able to interact back and forth.
So basically a healthcare worker
exactly
you could minimize the number of tools they have on their belt or attached to their hip.
And also, it's extremely light. I mean, this being a 3-inch.
Yes, very light.
Exactly, yeah. And then the other thing to kind of call out is that you'll notice that the LED that's actually on here, it's not a red LED. This is actually preferred for all healthcare vendors because of the red actually has a negative impact on PTSD patients and some other patients. So as you're going through and scanning things, you can be able to do that, and it has the white light behind it, which is actually a pretty preferable thing. And we'll see that in the DS9908R as well.
So just to recap real quick, this is a mobile computer,
yep,
full Android OS, actually same Android OS, same
exactly
in both devices, but it's also a barcode scanner,
yep,
a mobile computer,
yep,
and it could be their communication device for voice to, voice communication.
Yeah, and what's
or
unique,
even texting communication in some of the applications.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what we're seeing is a unique kind of a unique differentiator for these specific devices, whether it be the TC52 or the EC30, is that you have one application and you can use it on both platforms because they share the same firmware.
Makes sense.
So from a technical perspective, you don't have to create an application for the TC52 and one for the EC30. They work on both of them. It's just the same application. You just download and launch.
Makes support much easier too.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And then all the way at the end here, what we wanted to kind of talk you through is some of the specimen labeling. This is actually also RFID labeled, so if I was to be able to come back through here, I could be able to use the same device to be able to identify a specific specimen label. So these actually have the RFID antennas built into it as well. And then I can be able to validate that it's the correct specimen label as well. So you'll notice that this is a white light green aimer. This also has RFID enabled into it, so you can be able to do RFID validation as well when you you're using specimen labels. So depending on how you're labeling the actual specimen or blood bag or whatever it may be, you could be able to identify it using a scanner as well, and that's hooked up to the laptop that's right behind it. So that can be utilized in multiple different circumstances. I can even take this barcode that's on here and I can be able to take it back here and then scan that in as well. So it doesn't matter what the size of the barcode is or the format. Like these are the QR codes. You have data matrix that's over here. You have a regular 128 here. You have another 128 over there. So there's a whole bunch of different formats that these scanners can scan right out of the box, which is pretty cool.
The only thing you didn't talk about yet was the mobile printer right here, the ZQ520.
Yeah, so the other thing I did want to kind of touch on is a couple of things. As you're starting to do discharge, but also specimen labeling, what it's kind of really important is to be able to have a printer that's going to have, a near field communication integrated into it, so you could be able to do quick pairing between the devices, but also secondarily that you can actually hang off. There's actually a smaller variant. This doesn't have to be that big, but they're used in a number of different situations. Ticket, patrol officers and everything along those lines. But it's also used in healthcare, and there's healthcare variants where you can hang it off, or you can have it hung off a cart to be able to do specimen labeling, to be able to do updates of patient charts, all the rest of the stuff, utilizing printed out labels and media. This can also be utilized for mobile discharge, mobile admission, pretty much everything across the board.
Perfect. So for all of you who are still watching, want to say that all of this equipment is set up in the Zebra pod at the CWC, the Customer Welcome Center in Boise. This stuff is here for you guys to do customer demos or have customer demos done for you. The organizers of this room actually know how to run these demos and will be able to do these demos for your healthcare customers that may come in and visit for discussions.
Awesome.
James, thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark. Really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.